A billionaire shoves his black janitor into a piranha-filled pool during his own high society party. Guests gasp, then lift their phones, not to help her, but to capture her final seconds like some twisted entertainment. They've seen cruelty before, but never with canapes and champagne in hand. No one in that glittering mansion expected what happened next. What unfolded would shatter reputations, ignite outrage, and leave the billionaire begging for his life. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from. And if this story grips you, like and subscribe to the channel to support our growth, because tomorrow's story gets wilder. Now, let's begin. Amber Reginald didn't even have time to scream. Her body hit the surface of Mathew Livingston's private glass pool with a cold, violent smack, like a judge bringing down a gavel. The shock punched the air from her lungs as her uniform ballooned with water, dragging her downward into the churning blue. Light fractured around her. The pool's walls gleamed like an aquarium display, and through the wavering blur, she saw them, a swarm of red-bellied piranhas, sleek bodies slicing through the water, eyes dark and unreadable. Their jaws clicked open and shut with mechanical precision, rows of triangular teeth catching the faint glow of the underwater LEDs. Above her, the world was muffled chaos. Laughter. Screams. Phones held high. A circle of wealthy spectators leaned over the edge, their expressions a grotesque blend of fascination and thrill. Matthew's triumphant voice cut through the echo like a blade. "Someone time her. Bet she doesn't last 20 seconds. They didn't see fear in Amber's stillness. But they didn't know what stillness meant, not for someone like her. Her muscles burned for movement. Her lungs begged for oxygen. Instinct urged her to thrash upward, to claw for the surface. But she didn't. Amber went utterly motionless, letting gravity pull her deeper, away from the splashing light. She counted heartbeats, watched the fish circle, and matched her breaths, what little she had left, to their rhythm. She knew erratic motion was an invitation to feed. She knew panic was blood in the water. She knew because Shed studied predatory fish behavior long before she ever held a mop. While the world above waited for a pool of red, Amber watched the piranhas with calm calculation. And what they didn't realize, not Mathew, not his guests, not the crowd filming her terror, was that Amber Reginald had been studying this pool, these fish, and this man for weeks. 30 minutes earlier, her night had begun very differently. Amber Reginald stepped through the front doors of Mathew Livingston's mansion with the quiet confidence of someone who understood exactly how to disappear. The moment the heavy mahogany panels sealed behind her, the world shifted, sounds softened, air cooled, and the overwhelming opulence of the place spread before her like a stage set for a play she already knew the ending to. The foyer alone could have swallowed her entire childhood home. Marble floors stretched in soft cream and gold, polished so perfectly they mirrored the massive crystal chandelier glittering overhead. High archways framed every doorway, each guarded by discreet little domes of glass where surveillance cameras sat blinking, tracking movement with cold precision. Even the air smelled curated, expensive cologne, lemon floor polish, and something metallic beneath it all, like a scent that didn't belong but refused to fade. Amber paused just long enough to take it all in. Every camera, every blind spot, every unusual shadow that hinted at a hidden door or recessed panel. To anyone else, her stillness would have looked like awe. But her mind was already cataloging details the way a scientist labels specimens. Entrance hall, 2 visible cameras, one angled too high, likely a decoy. Air pressure shift near the north wall. Hidden corridor? Possibly leads to staff wing or security hub. She adjusted the strap of her cleaning bag and forced her breathing steady. This was just another shift, at least on the surface. Mop in hand, uniform crisp, smile polite. Exactly what Mathew Livingston expected from someone he considered background noise. But Amber was here with purpose, and every step she took reminded her why. She hadn't always been a janitor. There had been a time, not long ago, when she was the pride of her university's marine biology department, a prodigy who wrote papers professors whispered about in faculty break rooms. She'd been weeks away from defending her thesis on predatory fish behavior, the very research that now pulsed in the back of her mind like a second heartbeat. Then tragedy struck. Her mother's sudden illness. Hospital bills thicker than textbooks. Scholarship revoked after too many missed classes. A future she'd built with years of sweat collapsing in a matter of months. Working as a janitor wasn't the dream. But dreams could wait. Justice, real, tangible justice, could not. And Mathew Livingston, with all his wealth and rumors and monstrous secrets, was exactly the kind of storm she'd been forced to walk into. New girl? A voice muttered near her elbow. Amber turned to see Liza, one of the senior house staff, tying her apron with trembling fingers. Liza was barely in her 40s but looked decades older, lines etched deep in her face from years spent working under Mathew's rule. Yes, Amber said softly. First big shift. Liza didn't smile. Keep your head down. He notices the ones who don't. Before Amber could respond, a door slammed open at the far end of the corridor, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Mathew Livingston strode into view. He was everything the media photos promised. Impeccably dressed, posture sharp enough to cut glass, eyes glittering with that cold, performative charm rich men wore like a second suit. The kind of man who smiled without ever showing warmth. Is the ballroom ready? He snapped at no one in particular. A staff member flinched. Almost, sir. Almost, Mathew repeated, stepping close enough that the man took a step back. Do I pay you in almost? The staffer swallowed. No, sir. Then finish it. Mathew turned sharply and nearly collided with a younger man carrying a tray of champagne flutes. The employee stumbled. One glass tipped. A single drop of champagne splashed onto Mathew's expensive suit. Silence fell. Amber stiffened. Mathew stared at the wet spot as if it were a personal attack. Then, slowly, he lifted his gaze to the trembling server. Do you know how much this jacket costs? Mathew said calmly, too calmly. I'm sorry, sir. It was an accident. Accident? Mathew stepped forward, pressing a finger against the man's chest hard enough to make him retreat. Do you think my guests pay to see accidents? No, sir, Mathew reached out and flicked the overturned champagne glass off the tray. It shattered across the marble, shards skidding dangerously close to the server's shoes. Clean it, Mathew said coldly. With your hands. The server dropped to his knees immediately. Amber's jaw tightened. Her first instinct was to move, help, intervene, do something. But Liza caught her arm with a subtle shake of the head. Eyes wide. Terrified. Not here. Not yet. Amber forced her breath steady. She couldn't afford to draw Mathew's attention, not until she understood the terrain. As the party preparations resumed, Amber moved through the mansion with slow, deliberate steps. Each corridor revealed more about the building's skeleton: pressure-sensitive floor tiles near the east hall, motion-triggered lights in the gallery, reinforced doors leading to rooms no staff member ever entered. And then, there it was. The pool. She didn't mean to find it so quickly. She'd expected it to be hidden, guarded, tucked away beneath layers of security. But Mathew's pride was too large for secrecy. He'd built the thing like a centerpiece, a gleaming, glass-walled tank stretching across an entire sunroom, its water lit from below by soft blue LEDs that made waves ripple like liquid gemstones. Amber approached slowly. The room felt unnaturally warm, like a greenhouse. A faint hum vibrated through the air, mechanical, steady, familiar. Pumps, filters, heating systems, and something deeper, something heavy and industrial beneath the floor. She stepped closer, unable to stop herself. The water was so clear it looked unreal. Even before she saw the piranhas, she sensed them. Movement beneath the surface, shadows gliding, circling, waiting. Then one rose. A red-bellied piranha, sleek and silent. Its silver scales flashed briefly in the light, and its dark eyes met hers through the glass wall. There was no malevolence in its gaze, just instinct, precision, hunger. Amber exhaled slowly. Not fear. Recognition. Artificial current on the left side. Jets designed to mimic river flow. Overhead UV lights to mimic daylight. Filter grills reinforced. Could be manually overridden, maybe. Her mind clicked through assessments with clinical clarity. She leaned closer, tracing the lines of the metal frame with her eyes. Mechanical access panel to the south side. Emergency shutoff near the floor. Pipes feeding into the secondary chamber, meaning a hidden pump room was somewhere nearby. The piranha drifted away, disappearing into the slow-moving school deeper in the tank. Behind her, footsteps sounded, light, nervous, fast. Liza appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. "You shouldn't linger here," she whispered. "He shows this tank off. Loves it. Says it keeps people obedient." Amber nodded. "I can see why." Liza swallowed. "Just be careful." Amber gave a reassuring smile she didn't entirely feel. "I always am." But her attention drifted back to the shimmering water. The sunlight filtering through the high glass ceiling made the pool glow like a polished gem, beautiful, deadly, hypnotic. If she were anyone else, the sight might have frozen her, intimidated her, broken her before anything began. But Amber wasn't anyone else. She was studying, calculating, preparing. Because the moment she saw that tank, she understood something with terrifying clarity. If Mathew Livingston ever pushed her into this water, she would survive. And one day, she suspected, she'd have to prove it. The moment Amber stepped away from the piranha pool, she felt its presence behind her like a second set of eyes, silent, watchful, waiting. The mansion hummed with life, staff rushing to complete last-minute preparations, guests beginning to drift through the halls in sequined waves. But Amber's focus stayed sharp, her senses heightened by the glass tank still glowing in her mind. She resumed her janitorial duties with practiced quietness, pushing her supply cart through the corridors as though she were merely another unnoticed part of the house. But every sweep of her mop, every turn of a hallway, every corner of her gaze was dedicated to something far more intentional. She was studying. First, the pool itself. Whenever she passed the sunroom, Amber allowed her eyes to drift, casual, unassuming, over the mechanical systems beneath the floor. The faint whir of the pumps, the direction of water flow, the grid pattern of the drainage vents, and always the fish themselves. The piranhas were restless tonight, darting in tight circles beneath the glass surface. Their movement patterns were familiar, almost nostalgic. It took her back to her undergraduate research days, standing knee-deep in freshwater tanks, noting how environmental changes affected predator behavior. Temperature shift, increased speed, water agitation, heightened aggression, artificial lighting, disrupted feeding rhythm. Here, the piranhas moved in predictable loops, spiral, pause, dart, regroup. Not random, not uncontrolled. Highly responsive to stimuli. Good, she thought. Predictable means survivable. She watched them long enough to identify the dominant fish, the slightly larger male who led most of the rushes. His silver belly flashed with every tight turn, and she mentally mapped his route. First responder. First threat. First one ID need to anticipate. Amber! She snapped her head up, masking her focus with a smile. It was Liza again, breathless, pointing toward the main hall. Mathew wants the East Gallery floors finished before he arrives with the investors. Investors. Interesting. Amber nodded and pushed her cart forward. The gallery was a long, echoing stretch lined with portraits, every Livingston ancestor staring down with eyes painted too lifelike for comfort. At the far end, a group of sharply dressed staff hurried to replace burned-out light bulbs and straighten rugs in nervous silence. Amber knelt to organize her supplies, but her ears stayed tuned. Employees spoke in whispers. Another bonus delayed, again. Said the budget was frozen, yet he's buying a third sports car. Heard he threatened to fire Henry over asking for overtime pay. Everything aligned with the rumors Shed read before taking the job. Illegal embezzlement. Exploited workers. A financial empire built on deception. But rumors weren't evidence. Amber preferred proof. As she polished the gallery floor, a memory rose uninvited. Her old mentor, Dr. Lin, pacing in front of a row of fish tanks, tapping the glass with a pencil. Survival isn't about strength, he had said, leaning close to the piranha tank. It's about understanding. Predict the environment, predict the predator. Panic kills. Patterns save. Amber, 15 years younger and hungry to impress, had scribbled every word. Dr. Lin tapped the tank again. The fish surged toward the sound. See that? Stimulus response. Emotionally neutral. They're not evil. They're opportunists. Amber hadn't known then how often Shed revisit that lesson. Now, in this mansion, under the eyes of a different kind of predator, it became essential. She finished the gallery and moved toward the west wing. As she rounded a corner, her foot slid. A small patch of water, barely noticeable, had pooled on the polished floor, making it treacherously slick. Instinct snapped through her. Amber shifted her weight and caught herself quickly, knees bent, arm braced against the wall. Behind her, two housemaids gasped. "Oh my God, are you okay?" One whispered. Amber crouched, touching the puddle. "Condensation from the vent," she murmured. "Temperature differential between rooms. This is going to keep happening." She grabbed a towel and wiped the area clean, then positioned a warning sign in a spot staff would actually see. The maids exchanged a look. "It's like you already know how this place tries to hurt people," one said. Amber smiled faintly. "I've learned to pay attention." They hurried off as Amber straightened and noticed something odd. A security camera above the hallway had recently been rotated. Not by accident. Directed to see the far corner where staff often passed. Amber's skin prickled. Surveillance wasn't just for safety here. It was for control. Later that evening, Amber entered the sunroom again, this time at Mathew's request. A few investors had gathered near the pool, all dressed in tailored suits, sipping wine that cost more than her monthly pay. Mathew stood at the center, radiating self-satisfaction as he gestured toward the glass tank like it was his crown jewel. "These beauties are the rare red-bellied strain," he boasted. "Imported through private channels." Private, meaning illegal. One investor leaned closer. "Do they really attack that fast?" Mathew smirked. "Under the right conditions? Absolutely. Watch." He tapped the glass. Hard. Immediately, the school of piranhas whipped into a frenzy, swirling in tight, aggressive spirals. A few staff members flinched. Mathew noticed. He always noticed. "Relax," he said, voice dripping with amusement. "They can't get out. Unless, of course, someone falls in." His gaze slid across the room, passing over employees like a spotlight. Some dropped their eyes. Others swallowed their fear. Amber didn't move. Mathew's attention flicked to her. Curiosity sparked in his expression. Not respect, not interest, but calculation. He was the type of man who hated unreadable people. She offered him a polite nod and continued wiping the windowsills. Later that night, as Amber carried a tray of cleaning supplies through the dining hall, she noticed an object placed directly in her path, a small, decorative sculpture Mathew normally kept on a shelf. Odd. Too deliberate. She stepped around it without breaking stride. From behind a column, she caught the faintest glimpse of Mathew watching her, waiting to see if she'd trip. When she didn't, his smile tightened. Not pleased, irritated. He likes predictability, Amber realized. He likes people who stumble where he expects. She moved on without reacting. During a short break, Amber joined the other employees in the staff lounge. The atmosphere was buzzing with quiet dread. Staff sat stiffly, hands clenched, conversations kept to whispers. "He's on edge tonight," someone said. "He's always on edge," another replied. Amber listened silently. "He fired 2 people last week." One whispered. "Over nothing." Said they were problematic influences. More like they asked for promised wages. The group fell quiet as one of the security guards entered. Even he looked exhausted. "Be careful," he muttered to Amber as he passed. "He's watching everyone tonight." Amber nodded, absorbing every detail. Fear was thick here. It lived in the walls, breathed with the employees, followed their footsteps like a shadow. But fear was also data. Fear revealed patterns. Patterns revealed opportunity. While cleaning a narrow corridor behind the ballroom, Amber's mind drifted again to her thesis, 30 dense pages on piranha feeding behavior. Her research focused on environmental manipulation, how water flow, lighting, obstacles, and movement patterns altered attack probability. She had run simulations, created diagrams, built predictive models. For a moment, she missed that world. But then she remembered the final line of her thesis introduction, the one her professor had made her rewrite 3 times. "To understand a predator is to understand how not to be prey." She whispered the words to herself now, letting them anchor her. Late in the night, Amber passed Mathew's office while delivering fresh towels. The door was cracked open. Inside, she spotted stacks of documents, financial reports, offshore statements, and what looked unmistakably like falsified environmental permits. Her pulse quickened. Mathew's voice drifted out from inside the room, low and sharp. "I told you, transfer the funds quietly. No more delays. If the inspectors find out, well, you know how to deal with inspectors." A chilling pause. Amber stepped away before she was noticed, but her mind was spinning. Illegal imports, worker exploitation, financial crimes, all threads of a larger web. And she was now standing at its center. At the end of her shift, Amber returned to the sunroom one last time. The mansion was quieter now, lights dimmed, staff retreating to their quarters. The piranhas glided lazily through the glass-walled tank, their earlier frenzy faded into a silent, eerie calm. She stood before them, hands clasped behind her back, breathing evenly. "Predictable," she whispered. "You'll always be predictable." The fish turned, as if hearing her. Amber exhaled a long, steady breath. If Mathew Livingston ever pushed her into this pool, if he ever decided to make her an example, a spectacle, another victim, she would survive, no matter what it took. And she would make sure the world saw the truth buried under all his wealth and cruelty. The piranhas drifted back into shadow as Amber left the sunroom, but their presence clung to her thoughts like a phantom current. She could still feel their eyes following her, still hear the whisper of water against glass. Her vow lingered with her all the way down the hall. And then the music started. A low tremor of bass rolled through the mansion, followed by the bright crash of strings from the hired quartet. Voices rose next, sharp laughter, clinking glasses, the rustle of designer clothing. The Livingston mansion, formerly tense and quiet, blossomed into a full spectacle. The party had begun. Amber adjusted her uniform, tightened her gloves, and stepped into the main hall. The mansion had been transformed. Chandeliers glowed with warm gold light. Silk curtains shimmered. Servers dressed in crisp black and white uniforms flowed through the crowd with trays of champagne. The air smelled of money, perfume, cologne, rare flowers imported just for tonight. Amber's gaze swept the room automatically, noting exits, cameras, staff movements, and, most importantly, Mathew's position. He stood at the center of everything, dressed in a midnight blue suit tailored so perfectly it might as well have been welded to him. He charmed his guests with effortless arrogance, his laughter always a touch too loud, his gestures too theatrical. People gravitated toward him like moths to flame. Amber stayed on the outskirts, her mop and cart giving her a cloak of invisibility. Staff were ignored here, except when Mathew needed someone to target. She kept her movements slow and deliberate, watching. Always watching. Near the marble staircase, a pair of wealthy guests sipped champagne while eyeing the sunroom. "So that's the pool," one whispered, leaning in conspiratorially. The other nodded. "I heard he imported the fish illegally. Supposed to be incredibly aggressive. Piranhas that respond to the smallest movements." "Oh, I heard something even better," the first replied, eyes sparkling with wicked delight. "He uses it to test new employees. Thins out the weak ones." Their laughter was light, careless, cruel. Amber's jaw tightened, but she kept her head down. Her hands were steady as she wiped an already spotless banister. More guests joined the conversation. "You think he'll show us something tonight? He always does. I heard last year someone almost lost a finger." Almost. Boring. Amber forced herself to breathe evenly. The gossip was entertainment to them. Spectacle. They saw danger as a party trick. And Mathew fed off that attention. Amber moved to the ballroom to collect discarded napkins and glasses. From there, she saw Mathew at the far end of the room, cornering a member of the catering staff. "You call this presentation?" he hissed, gripping the man's shoulder hard enough to leave marks. "This garnish is arranged clockwise." "Clockwise," I said, counterclockwise. "Do you even listen?" Sorry, Mr. Livingston." "Well, sorry doesn't fix incompetence, does it?" Mathew shoved the platter into the man's chest. "Do better or don't come back." The staff member stumbled away, nearly tripping as he tried to hold the platter steady. Guests nearby watched with mild amusement, as though the humiliation were part of the evening's entertainment. Amber's stomach twisted. She forced herself not to react visibly. Any show of empathy here was dangerous. Mathew turned, scanning the room, and his gaze landed on her. Amber kept wiping down the table, expression neutral. But Mathew's eyes narrowed. He noticed, she realized. He always notices. Soon the guests drifted toward the sunroom as though drawn by gravity. Mathew led them with a flourish, arms outstretched. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "if you haven't yet seen the highlight of my home, allow me the pleasure of the grand reveal." Amber followed discreetly, tasked with collecting empty glasses and stray trash. She stayed at the back of the group, but close enough to observe. The piranha pool shimmered beneath the soft lighting, the fish gliding like shadows beneath the water's surface. Gasps, murmurs, fascinated whispers rippled through the crowd. One woman clutched her husband's arm. "They look unnervingly calm." Mathew grinned. "Calm is relative. They're opportunists. Give them the right conditions." He lowered his voice dramatically. "And they become quite enthusiastic." The guests chuckled nervously. He tapped the glass twice. The fish swarmed instantly, forming a dark, churning mass. Several guests jumped back. Mathew's smile widened. "Magnificent, isn't it? Nature's perfect little storm." Amber stayed on the sidelines, strategically behind a marble pillar. From here she could study both the pool and Mathew. He was in his element, cruel, theatrical, basking in power. While picking up a discarded napkin, Amber crouched near the edge of the sunroom floor. She used the moment to inspect the filtration pipes again. The intake valve on the left was slightly louder tonight, and the circulation vent showed a faint vibration. Useful information. Maybe life-saving information. Her eyes flicked to the top edge of the tank. The glass lip was narrow, dangerously so. Anyone pushed with enough force could lose footing instantly. She didn't plan to get close enough to test that. But fate, especially in a place like this, didn't care about plans. Nearby, a small group placed bets on which staff member might be brave enough to approach the pool. "Oh, come on," a drunken man insisted. "Someone should dip a hand in. These creatures can smell fear, can't they?" His companion laughed. "Mathew should make one of the cleaners do it." Amber's shoulders stiffened. Another woman pointed her wine glass casually in Amber's direction. Maybe. She looks steady enough. Might actually survive." Mathew overheard. His expression shifted, something cold, calculating sliding into place. "Oh." He approached Amber with slow, measured steps, as though savoring the anticipation. "Amber," he said smoothly. She stood upright, hands clasped politely. "Yes, Mr. Livingston? You seem very confident tonight." Her heart thudded, but she kept her voice calm. "Just doing my job, sir." He circled her slightly, examining her the way a scientist might study a curious specimen. "But you're not nervous." Most new employees flinch near the pool. She offered a mild, practiced smile. "I'm more focused on the cleanup." "That so?" His tone dropped, soft but dangerous. "Confidence can be admirable, or it can be a problem." Their eyes locked. Amber didn't look away. That, she suspected, was her mistake. Mathew's lips curled into something between a smile and a threat. "Well," he said, turning to his guests, "perhaps we'll test that confidence later. For now, enjoy the festivities." He left her standing alone, stomach tightening. As the night deepened, the party grew louder, wilder, more chaotic. But beneath the music and laughter, an undercurrent of tension hummed like electricity. Amber felt it. The other staff felt it. Even the houseplants seemed to lean away from Mathew as he prowled the room, eyes sharp, smile sharper. And every so often, he glanced at Amber. Assessing. Planning. The lights gleamed off the pool behind him, throwing shifting, aquatic shadows across the walls. The room felt unsteady, like the calm before the break of a wave. While cleaning near the orchestra platform, Amber overheard a guest say, "Mathew's in a mood tonight. Someone's going to get it." Another laughed. "Drama at the Livingston party?" "Always." Amber's pulse quickened. Her instincts screamed the same warning she felt years ago during a dive when the water temperature suddenly changed, a subtle shift that signaled danger. She straightened, scanning the crowd. Mathew was talking to a cluster of guests, smiling too broadly, gesturing too wildly. But his eyes kept flicking to her. He's preparing something, and that something would not be harmless. Near midnight, as Amber headed back toward the sunroom for another sweep, she felt it again, the weight of eyes on her. Slow, deliberate, predatory. She paused at the threshold. The piranha pool glowed under the ambient lighting. Guests hovered nearby, drinking, laughing, oblivious. But Mathew now stood alone beside the glass tank, waiting for her. Amber inhaled slowly, steadying her nerves. The danger was no longer hypothetical. She was being singled out, targeted, marked. And she knew, without needing to see the future, that everything was heading toward the pool. Drop a comment if you're hooked to the story. The music thinned. The laughter sharpened. The piranha pool glowed at her side like an open mouth in the center of the sunroom. And Mathew, still standing beside it, watched her with predatory calm. She approached with her cart, every step measured, controlled. "Amber," Mathew called out, voice smooth as polished marble. Perfect timing. The guests turned. Several smirked, already sensing entertainment. Champagne glasses glittered in their hands. Their eyes were hungry for diversion. Amber stopped a respectful distance away, hands on her cart's handle. "Yes, Mr. Livingston? There's been a small mishap." Mathew pointed to a spilled drink on the tiled floor near the glass tank. An artfully placed spill, no doubt from one of his enablers. "Clean it." His tone was flat, commanding, performative. Amber nodded and knelt to absorb the liquid with a cloth. She could feel dozens of eyes on her. Someone giggled. Another whispered, "Here we go." Amber ignored them, focusing on slow, deliberate movements. But Mathew stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Careful," he drawled. "We wouldn't want another accident." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Amber kept her expression calm. The cloth slid across the floor. She was almost done. Then it happened. A foot nudged the bucket. Hard. Cold, dirty water splashed across the floor, soaking the hem of her pants, splattering across Mathew's expensive shoes. A collective gasp sliced the air. Amber froze. The bucket hadn't tipped by itself. She felt the subtle impact. Someone, likely one of Mathew's favored guests, had kicked it forward. Mathew looked down at his shoe, then at Amber. His smile grew slow and venomous. "Well," he said loudly, "that was clumsy." "No, sir, the bucket." "Oh, don't make excuses," he said, voice booming with false amusement. "You embarrassed me in front of my guests." The crowd murmured, delighted. Amber rose to her feet, heart hammering. "It wasn't." Mathew cut her off with raised hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, shall we give her a chance to redeem herself?" The guests cheered. Amber's blood ran cold. Mathew stepped close enough that only she could hear the next part. "You should have stayed invisible." Then he shoved her. Hard. The world tilted. Light fractured into streaks. The gasps and cheers blurred into a single roar. Amber hit the water. A shock of freezing cold punched the breath from her lungs. Her uniform dragged her downward, fabric ballooning, shoes sinking like stones. The water muffled the screams above. But what she felt most was the instant electric shift in the pool. Movement. The piranhas sensed her entry. The water turned darker as the school converged. Silver bellies glinted. Shadows tightened. Count the seconds. Regain control. Amber forced her body into a slow turn, ignoring the instinct to thrash. Thrashing would draw them faster. Her fingers splayed gently, slicing the water without abrupt motion. Her eyes tracked the dominant fish, the larger male shed observed earlier. He led the circle from the right. "They're not attacking yet. They're investigating. Wait for the trigger." Movement. Blood. Panic. She kept her breathing shallow, legs moving in controlled, minimal motions. Above her, the blurred halo of the surface rippled with the silhouettes of guests crowding around the tank. She could hear faint distortion, their shrieks, their excited cheers. She could almost picture Mathew's smile. Focus. The dominant male darted closer. Amber angled her body, letting the displacement of water push him slightly off course. The rest followed his lead. A circle of muscle and teeth. Fins thrashing. Bodies tightening their spiral. They waited for her to make a mistake. She wouldn't. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The piranhas accelerated in short bursts, testing her. She stayed calm. Slow. Predictable. But she couldn't remain still forever. Her lungs were already burning. Amber let her mind retreat into training, the long nights in the research labs, her professor's voice echoing across water tanks. Predict the predator. Predict the moment. Stack the environment in your favor. She glanced toward the filtration vents. The nearest one sucked water in with a steady pull, not enough to drag her, but enough to distort the current. Use it. She shifted slightly, letting the current drift her sideways. Her movement was smooth, like part of the water itself. The piranhas reacted. Some darted forward, but hesitated when she didn't thrash. Good. Her goal wasn't to escape the fish entirely. It was to reach the mechanical access panel behind the pump system. She saw it, a dark metal rectangle just beneath the tank's inner ledge. She could fit her fingers under it, but she needed the right moment. Amber broke through the water just long enough to pull in a thin, sharp breath, only to hear roaring excitement. Look at her. Is she still alive? This is incredible. Mathew, you're wicked. And Mathew's voice rose above them all, carefree and triumphant. I told you she was confident. Let's see how long that lasts. Amber's pulse spiked, not from panic, but rage. She slipped back beneath the surface before anyone could grab her or push her down again. The piranhas surged closer. Underwater once more, she used her legs to make a controlled backward sweep, enough to stir the water. The dominant male snapped toward the disturbance. Amber slipped sideways, toward the intake vent. The fish followed the disturbance instead of her, swarming the area in a frenzy. Predictable behavior. Stimulus response. Exactly what she counted on. She glided toward the access panel while the school remained occupied. Her lungs screamed for air, but she forced herself to stay calm. She reached the panel. Her fingers found the lip. She pulled. The metal groaned. The movement sent a vibration through the water, small but detectable. Half the school jerked toward her. Amber's heart slammed against her ribs. Steady. She yanked again. The panel loosened enough for her to slip her fingers behind it. She kicked once, gently, like a swimmer adjusting position. The fish darted toward the motion. She swerved the opposite direction and tugged the panel open just enough to create a gap. A narrow dark space lay behind it, the interior access to the filtration system. Her escape route. The school tightened around her now, drawn by the shift in water pressure and her unavoidable movements. She had seconds. Amber inhaled the last bit of air shed held, pressed her forearms against her chest to streamline her movement, and thrust herself through the opening. The metal edge scraped her shoulder. Her uniform caught briefly. She twisted, muscles burning, and slipped inside. The piranhas slammed into the opening behind her, teeth clicking against metal, bodies writhing in confused agitation. They were too large to fit through. Amber floated inside the dark chamber, trembling, chest heaving in sharp bursts as water dripped from the panel overhead. She was still in danger, still underwater, but alive. The muffled roar of the crowd above echoed through the pipes. She pressed her hand to her pounding heart. I made it. She reached for the interior ladder that led to the maintenance platform, a place where she could climb up, breathe, and plan her next move. The metal rungs were slick beneath Amber's fingers, water streaming from her sleeves as she climbed into the narrow maintenance alcove. Her breaths came sharp and ragged, echoing against the steel walls. She pushed upward until her head broke the surface inside a cramped air pocket just big enough for her to breathe. Muffled cheers rose from outside the tank. Mathew's voice boomed over them, furious and disbelieving. Where is she? Did she drown already? He sounded annoyed she hadn't died on schedule. Amber pressed her back against the cold metal, letting her heartbeat steady. The piranhas churned on the other side of the thin wall, bodies scraping, tails flicking, agitated by the disturbance shed caused. She closed her eyes for 1 second. You're alive. Stay ahead of him. Stay ahead of the fish. She angled her body and peered through the slit where shed entered. The dominant male piranha patrolled the area, circling restlessly. He hadn't forgotten her. Amber lowered herself back into the water. She couldn't stay in the alcove long. The tank systems weren't designed for a human. Carbon monoxide levels would climb. The maintenance space might flood if Mathew tampered with controls. She braced herself and slipped back out into the main chamber of the pool. The water welcomed her like a cold slap. A roar of excitement erupted from above. There she is. No way she's still alive. Mathew, you didn't say she could swim. Shadows clustered along the deck, guests leaning over the edges, phones pointed down, faces flushed with alcohol and anticipation. Mathew shoved someone aside to see better. His expression twisted from shock to irritation. "Unbelievable," he muttered. Then louder, "If the fish won't do it, I will." He grabbed a metal champagne bucket and hurled it into the water. The impact sent a violent wave crashing over Amber's head, jolting the piranhas into a frenzy. She felt them accelerate toward her, a surge of sleek bodies slicing through the water. Her mind sharpened instantly. Distraction. Use the turbulence. Make them chase the disruption, not you. She kicked hard, but not in a straight line. She angled her legs to create a spiraling motion. The circular disturbance drew the school away from her trajectory, their teeth flashing as they darted toward the turbulence instead of her limbs. A few still followed her. The younger ones, more impulsive. She spun in a controlled arc, flipping her body parallel to the central jet stream. Shed studied the pool's current flows for days. The central jet pulled water outward, a lazy whirl that could redirect anything drifting nearby. She let it take her. Her body rotated gently, her hands gliding just enough to steer without splashing. The young piranhas pursued, but the current tugged them off course, sucking them into a spiral that kept them occupied. Above the water, the crowd erupted into applause. "What is she doing? She's actually strategizing? This is insane." Mathew didn't clap. He grabbed a pool skimmer and jabbed the pole into the water, trying to drive her back toward the center, toward the hungry mouth struggling against the current. The pole's metal tip slammed into her shoulder. Pain shot down her arm. She swallowed a cry and dove deeper to avoid the next strike. The sudden descent disoriented the fish again. Their formations scattered, then reformed. She needed a better position, somewhere near the pool's control mechanisms. She'd seen the layout in a brief moment earlier, a panel embedded into the decorative frame on the far right side. She swam low, near the sloped glass bottom. Her fingers brushed the seam where the glass met the steel frame. Water hummed around her from the circulation pumps. A flashback cut through her panic. Her marine biology professor, tapping the side of a tank filled with piranhas. They notice pressure shifts before they notice shapes. If you can change the currents, just slightly, you buy yourself time. Change the currents. Amber glanced at the intake grate near the bottom. It fed into the same maintenance space shed come from. The water flow wasn't strong yet. She angled toward it. Behind her, the dominant male changed direction. He sensed purposeful movement, the kind that meant prey. The school tightened. Amber kicked, controlling her strokes to minimize splashing. She skimmed along the glass floor, heart pounding. The grate shimmered ahead. A shadow passed above her, Mathew leaning over the edge, face red with fury. "Stop swimming," he shouted as if survival were an insult. "Stay still and take your punishment." More laughter. More cameras. Amber ignored all of it. She reached the grate and wrapped her fingers around the edge. With a hard yank, she dislodged one of the metal bars Shed loosened earlier while hiding. A burst of suction surged outward, warping the water around her. The fish reacted instantly, startled by the sudden current shift. A few darted toward the grate, confused by the vortex forming there. Amber used the moment to push herself upward, gaining distance. Mathew saw her rise and exploded. He grabbed a decorative marble orb, heavy, expensive, and hurled it directly at her. "Die already!" Amber heard the roar, but she was already anticipating impact. She inhaled sharply and dove at an angle. The orb sliced into the water where her head had been, triggering another frenzy of thrashing fish. "Holy hell, he's actually trying to kill her," someone whispered. Others didn't care. They cheered harder. Amber broke the surface near the far side of the pool and gulped air. Her arms shook. Her leg felt bruised from the orb's shockwave. She scanned the wall for the control panel. There. A slim, barely visible latch behind a decorative bronze plate shaped like rippling waves. Shed noticed it only once, during a cleaning shift, but she hadn't forgotten. She took a breath and dove again. The fish followed. She didn't fight the school this time. She swam toward the wall, letting them approach in a semicircle, but she kept her movements predictable enough not to provoke a feeding rush. She reached the plate. Her fingers slid behind the lip. She pulled. The plate shifted open 2 inches, just enough to reveal a set of emergency switches and the primary current regulator. There it was. The system that could reverse every flow in the pool. A weapon. A trap. Her only advantage. She didn't pull the lever yet. Not with the fish this close. Not with Mathew charged with adrenaline, unpredictable as an injured predator. She needed them all distracted. She needed him closer. The dominant male brushed her calf. She froze. Then she shifted slightly, offering the illusion of retreat. The school surged forward, overcommit to the wrong angle. She slipped upward, leaving them clustered at the wall. Her hand hovered over the switch. Not yet. Above the surface, Mathew stormed along the deck, trying to keep up with her movements. His anger pulsed off him like heat, and in that moment, Amber understood. He would come closer. He couldn't resist. He needed to be the center of the spectacle. Good. She took one more breath. If you push me again, Livingston, I'll be ready. The fish circled. The guests cheered. Mathew paced dangerously close to the tank's slippery edge. Amber pressed her palm against the regulator. She had a plan now, and she was ready to turn the pool against him. If you've made it this far, please like and subscribe to support us. Thank you. Amber's hand hovered over the regulator, the metal cold and slick beneath her fingers. Every pulse of the water around her echoed the pounding of her heart. Above, the cheers and frantic shouts of the guests reverberated against the glass walls, but she didn't focus on them. She focused on the physics, the currents, the piranhas, and the man who had underestimated her. She inhaled slowly, one step at a time. Timing was everything. A sudden surge of movement caught her eye. The dominant male was circling closer, a flash of silver teeth visible even through the distorted water. She adjusted her body, letting the fish's momentum carry it past her, keeping her movements deliberate and measured. One wrong twitch and the piranhas would sense prey. She refused to be prey. Her fingers finally pressed the first switch. The current shifted, subtle at first, a gentle tug that nudged water in a spiraling motion across the tank. The fish hesitated, circling, confused. Amber allowed herself a quiet smile. The first step had worked. She pressed another lever. This one controlled the jets along the sides of the tank. Water roared through them with sudden power, creating a small whirlpool that twisted the center into a miniature maelstrom. The dominant male shot forward instinctively, but Amber guided the current to push him off course, just enough to scatter the rest of the school. Panic rippled through them in flashes of silver, fins slashing at the spinning water. Above the pool, Mathew's laughter rang out. She's moving. Look at her. How long do you give her now? The guests leaned over the edges, phones raised, shouting, placing bets. Amber ignored the spectacle. She had no time for their amusement. Her mind calculated each angle, each response of the fish. Their instincts were predictable. She knew the center of the pool, the precise point where the flow could be reversed completely, and that would be her final move. Mathew, oblivious to her calculations, leaned closer to the tank. His eyes were wide with smug anticipation. Come on, Amber, he called down, voice dripping with taunting arrogance. Don't make me do it myself. Surely you can't swim forever. Amber's fingers rested on the final switch, ready to trigger the full whirlpool. She let the water churn around her, teasing the piranhas into frenetic motion. Some swirled in tight circles, Others darted toward the edges in confusion, colliding and thrashing. She adjusted the pressure slightly, creating uneven currents that made the tank a living, unpredictable trap. Mathew stepped closer, ignoring the slippery floor and the shifting crowd. He wanted a show. He wanted power, the satisfaction of dominance over her. He would give it to her, but not the way he expected. Amber watched, waiting for the moment he leaned too far. The guests leaned in with him, oblivious to the danger, caught up in the thrill of the spectacle. Their cheers grew louder, a tide of noise she barely noticed. Then he did it. He reached over the lip of the tank, angling his body too far, foot slipping on the slick marble. His center of gravity betrayed him. He teetered, and then he fell. Time slowed. Amber's eyes followed him as he plummeted into the water he had designed to destroy her. The splash was violent, water exploding around him, sending piranhas scattering in every direction. The whirlpool surged fully, spinning the water into a maelstrom that tossed fish and man alike. Mathew flailed, clawing at the slick sides, panicked and uncoordinated. Above the surface, guests screamed. Some cheered, some shouted warnings. Phones captured every angle, recording the billionaire's descent from untouchable to vulnerable. Amber's hands didn't shake. She kept her fingers on the panel, monitoring currents, tracking fish movement, and calculating distance and force. The piranhas reacted instantly, thrashing in chaotic arcs. Amber adjusted the flow to keep them occupied, preventing them from clustering too close to him. Their circling formed a barrier between Mathew and any chance of stability. He swung his arms, trying to grab the edge, only to be pushed off balance again by a sudden surge. Amber thought back to her thesis, to the countless hours studying predatory fish behavior. They attacked patterns, reaction times, sudden splashes. The water had become her ally. She allowed the chaos to unfold, letting the pool's mechanics amplify her advantage. Mathew gasped, water rushing into his mouth, eyes wide with terror. "Help!" His voice was hoarse, panicked, shaking. "Get me out!" Amber didn't move toward him. Not yet. She adjusted the jets again, creating a rapid swirling current along one side. The piranhas responded to the increased flow, pushing him toward the opposite end. Each movement was deliberate, her own breathing slow and precise. Every reaction she made minimized her risk while maximizing his disorientation. She reached for her phone in a waterproof pouch, recording the scene from the panel's opening. Every flail, every terrified shout, every glint of piranha teeth was captured. This was evidence, irrefutable. And it was poetic justice. Mathew's arrogance faltered completely as the realization hit him. He was no longer in control. The pool, once his weapon, had become a trap. The guests screamed and laughed, oblivious to the shift of power occurring beneath the surface. Amber monitored the circulation valves. A slight adjustment here, a minor increase in current there. She could prolong the chaos just long enough for him to panic fully without risking his life. This was the equilibrium she needed. He was learning the rules too late. Mathew, desperate and exhausted, slammed his hands against the water. He tried to reach the nearest ladder, but the jets forced him away, spinning him in a circle, surrounded by frenzied fish. His topcoat clung to him like a second skin, his shoes useless on the slick pool bottom. Amber kept her attention on the dominant male. She guided the fish subtly, using instinctive adjustments to the currents, creating controlled chaos. Nothing too deadly, yet every motion reinforced the lesson. This was not murder. It was consequence. Above, the guests began to murmur uneasily, sensing that this spectacle was now beyond entertainment. Some laughed nervously, some stopped filming, unsure how far it would go. Mathew's shouting escalated. "Help me! Someone!" Amber finally released the last lever, creating the strongest current surge yet, a rapid whirlpool aimed directly at the center of the pool. The motion disoriented the fish completely, sending them into a frantic frenzy and spinning Mathew helplessly. He slammed against the glass with a thud, water spraying into the faces of the closest spectators. The sound of teeth snapping, water churning, and his frantic gasps filled the room. Amber watched carefully, calculating exactly how far to let the currents and chaos go. She could end it at any second. Then, as quickly as the chaos had peaked, she disengaged. The whirlpool slowed. Currents diminished. Piranhas circled, curious but no longer aggressive. The water stilled enough for Mathew to grab the ladder at the edge of the pool, shivering, drenched, humiliated. Amber exhaled, letting tension drain from her shoulders. The danger had passed, for now. But she didn't relax entirely. Her fingers still hovered over the backup controls. One false move from him, one sudden panic, and the pool could become lethal in seconds. Mathew coughed, sputtered, and finally looked up at her from the water. His face was pale, wet hair plastered to his forehead. Fear was written across every line. He had gone from predator to prey in moments. Amber pressed record one last time, capturing his terror, his desperation, his confession of helplessness. Every second of this was evidence, proof of cruelty reversed by intelligence, skill, and patience. Above, the guests were silent for a heartbeat before realization sank in. The man they had expected to dominate and humiliate now clung to the edge of his pool, the spectacle of his invincibility utterly shattered. Amber surfaced, lifting herself onto the platform, dripping and controlled, every eye on her, but none daring to challenge her. She allowed herself a small, quiet smile. Justice had been served. The power dynamic had shifted. And the night was far from over. Mathew clung to the ladder like a man drowning in more than water. The glass tank distorted his reflection. Pale, soaked, and trembling, his arrogance dissolved into terror. Amber stood above him, dripping, composed, her eyes cold with precision. Every second he gasped, flailed, or pleaded only reinforced the lesson he had been too blind to learn. "Please," he croaked, voice cracking. "Help me. I didn't mean." Amber raised her phone, capturing every moment. The camera lens recorded his desperation, the slick glass around him, the panicked movements of the thrashing piranhas, and the chaotic currents Shed orchestrated. Every detail would be evidence. Every second of terror would document the truth. "You're going to live," she said evenly. "But the world needs to hear the truth first." Mathew's eyes widened. "Truth? What do you mean?" "Everything," she replied. "I've seen it all. And now so will everyone else." He splashed, trying to turn, trying to find leverage, but the currents still held sway. Even after her partial disengagement, the whirlpool Shed created had left the water uneven, disorienting. The piranhas circled in nervous arcs, teeth glinting as they tested the boundaries of the current, and Mathew realized he could no longer command anything. Not the guests, not the fish, not even his own limbs. Amber's mind catalogued everything she had observed over the past weeks. The secret ledgers she had glimpsed, the whispered threats to staff, the manipulations of the pool's infrastructure. She had recorded it all in careful mental notes, but now she needed him to say it aloud. "You've been running illegal operations," she prompted, voice calm but authoritative. "Embezzlement, worker intimidation, environmental violations. Confess." His face twisted between disbelief and rage. What are you doing?" "Confess," she repeated. "Every bit of it. On record." The panic that overtook him was instantaneous. His legs kicked frantically against the slick glass, sending tiny waves crashing over the ladder. Okay, he gasped, voice high and tremulous. I manipulated the books. Yes, the staff, they weren't treated fairly. I built the pool for intimidation. The guests gasped audibly, some cheering, some whispering horrified questions. Mathew's humiliation rippled through the room. He had designed the pool to display control, to terrorize, and now he was the one exposed, helpless, at the mercy of a janitor he had underestimated. Amber's camera captured every confession. "Keep going," she said softly, almost soothingly, as if she were coaxing the truth out of a frightened animal. I tried to cover up environmental damage, improper disposal. Oh God, I tried to keep it hidden from authorities." He shook violently. "The contractors, the staff, they were all pawns. I didn't care if anyone got hurt." Her fingers adjusted the camera angle slightly, making sure to catch the stark horror on his face, the desperation in his voice, the raw panic in his movements. The currents of the pool made every flail look dangerous, but Amber's calculations ensured he was never in lethal proximity to the piranhas. She controlled the chaos with surgical precision. I pushed someone," he yelled, finally realizing the gravity of what had happened to Amber. "I shoved her into the pool. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted to humiliate her. Please, help me." The crowd went silent. The laughter and cheers of moments ago had drained from the room, replaced by shock, disbelief, and something akin to fear. Mathew had been untouchable, a symbol of untamed wealth and cruel power, but now he was exposed, trembling, and utterly reliant on Amber's mercy. Amber's voice remained steady. "And now everyone knows. You're accountable." The piranhas swirled in slow arcs around him, attracted by the continued motion of the currents and the panic of the moment. Amber adjusted the valves slightly, enough to nudge him closer to the ladder's edge, but not enough to endanger his life. Every adjustment was precise, calculated, deliberate. Mathew gasped, voice raw. I can't control it. Please stop. Please. Someone, help me." Amber exhaled slowly. The chaos she had orchestrated, the currents, the panicked fish, the camera, all of it had served its purpose. He had confessed, fully, publicly, with every word on record. His empire of fear and exploitation had been captured in real time, witnessed by dozens of elite spectators, and preserved in video evidence she controlled. A trembling, wet hand grasped at the ladder. His eyes darted to hers, pleading. Amber's fingers hovered over the final lever, the one that would fully neutralize the currents. She didn't need to pull it yet. The moment wasn't over until she decided it was. Mathew thrashed again, clinging to the ladder, dripping water from his hair and suit. "Please. I'll tell everything. Just help me." Amber raised her voice, clear and commanding. "You've told enough. The world has heard you. Stay still. One more movement, and you'll only make it worse for yourself." He froze, every muscle rigid, eyes wide. Above, the guests had stopped their recordings, frozen by the surreal spectacle of a man stripped bare of control and dignity. Some whispered, some muttered prayers, some shook their heads in disbelief. Amber remained calm, her presence commanding even as she was soaked, cold, and exhausted. The currents slowed at her touch, guiding him gently toward a safe corner of the ladder. The piranhas, now less agitated, circled without aggression. Every motion was controlled. Amber had ensured no lethal opportunity presented itself. Amber switched the final lever. Water flow normalized. The whirlpool dissipated, leaving the pool calm but still menacing, a glassy reminder of the danger that had nearly been lethal moments ago. Mathew clung to the ladder, gasping, humiliated, and utterly exposed. She kept recording. Every gulp, every shiver, every trembling apology. The evidence was undeniable. "Step back," she said firmly. "You are done here. You are exposed. You are accountable. And you survive because I allow it." He nodded frantically, grateful, terrified, and utterly powerless. The veneer of wealth and superiority he had maintained for years had evaporated in minutes, replaced by raw fear and recognition of his own hubris. Amber lowered the phone. The guests remained silent, watching, understanding that something extraordinary had just occurred. The reversal of power, justice delivered with intelligence and precision, and cruelty confronted without bloodshed. She took a slow breath, reaching for the emergency controls to secure the pool fully. The valves clicked under her fingers, systems locked, and the water stilled completely. Mathew remained clinging to the ladder, shivering, drenched, and completely at her mercy. Amber stepped back, dripping but composed. She surveyed the room. The guests were frozen, some in awe, some in horror, some still processing what they had just witnessed. She had recorded everything: the confession, the chaos, and the moral victory. Mathew looked up at her, tears mingling with water on his cheeks. I don't know what to say. Amber's gaze was steady, unflinching. Say nothing. The evidence speaks for itself. And remember this: arrogance and cruelty cannot survive intelligence, preparation, and moral clarity. The room remained silent as Amber's words sank in. For the first time, she felt the shift she had anticipated all along. Power had changed hands, and the man who had believed himself untouchable now understood just how fragile control could be. Amber's hands left the controls. The pool, once a weapon, was now simply a pool. Mathew clung to the ladder, defeated, and the guests watched in stunned silence. Justice had been done, and she had delivered it flawlessly. If you're enjoying this story, please make sure to like and subscribe and drop a comment. Amber's hand hovered over the final lever, the one that would fully neutralize the currents and stop the chaos she had orchestrated. Mathew clung to the ladder, soaked, shivering, utterly exposed. The guests had gone silent, their phones still raised but faces frozen in awe and disbelief. Amber's eyes swept the room, taking in the scene of humiliation, fear, and the consequences of cruelty. For a long moment, she did nothing. Every instinct screamed for the final act, the one that could have ensured total retribution. She could have left him to the water, left the currents swirling, let him flounder just a little longer while the piranhas circled in a controlled frenzy. The thought passed, a whisper at the edge of her mind. But Amber's hand stayed steady. Her moral compass didn't allow it. Justice didn't require vengeance. Slowly, deliberately, she pressed the lever. The current subsided, the whirlpool dissipated, and the water calmed. The piranhas circled gently, disoriented but no longer aggressive. The pool, once a weapon, returned to its mundane state, a reflective, glassy body of water, almost peaceful after the chaos. Mathew sagged against the ladder, chest heaving, drenched and humiliated. Every inch of his posture screamed defeat. His expensive suit clung to his body, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes wide with realization. He was no longer the master of this domain. He had believed himself untouchable, invincible, above consequence. Amber had proven otherwise without spilling a drop of blood. From the corner of her eye, she noticed the guests exchanging glances. Some whispered urgently, some lowered their phones, and some muttered apologies under their breath. A few looked at her with newfound respect, though she did not seek it. Her victory was not for them. It was for truth. Amber stepped back, her body still slick with water but her movements calm and deliberate. She surveyed the pool, the room, the man who had tried to weaponize fear itself, and allowed herself a quiet exhale. The adrenaline of the confrontation lingered, but her mind was clear. She had acted with precision, intelligence, and moral integrity. That clarity, more than the spectacle, was her triumph. A security team, called earlier by a discreet staff member who had observed the chaos from a safe distance, rushed in. They quickly secured the area, guiding Mathew out of the pool and toward towels, medical attention, and containment of the immediate fallout. Amber recorded silently as they moved, ensuring every action was documented. "Stay with him," she said simply to the lead officer. "Check for injuries. Make sure the footage is preserved." The officer nodded, not daring to question her authority. Amber's presence alone radiated command, a calm, calculated dominance that required no shouting, no threats. Mathew was helped out, drenched and trembling, and Amber followed at a careful distance, her eyes never leaving him. His humiliation was total. Staff whispered among themselves, their eyes wide, but their fear replaced by awe at her composure. The arrogance and cruelty he had wielded so freely was now laid bare, impotent and exposed. The guests, meanwhile, began to murmur among themselves. Some were shocked into silence, some whispered apologies for cheering earlier, and a few, braver or more intrigued than moral, waited to see how the situation would resolve. Amber didn't acknowledge them. Her focus remained singular: justice, clarity, and truth. Authorities arrived shortly after, tipped off by her discreet notifications and the viral potential of the footage she had been recording. Detectives, environmental inspectors, and financial auditors began to move through the mansion, carefully documenting evidence. Amber handed over her recordings, her meticulous footage chronicling every confession, every act of cruelty, and every mechanical manipulation of the pool. Mathew, wrapped in a towel and muttering, finally realized the weight of the night. The whispers of his staff, the astonished faces of the guests, the officers documenting his every word and move, it all struck him at once. He was exposed not just socially, but legally and morally. No amount of money, connections, or influence could shield him from the consequences Amber had engineered. Amber watched silently, calm, composed, and resolute. She had not acted out of anger, nor had she sought to humiliate beyond what he had already earned. Her role was to balance the scales, and she had done so with precision. The piranha pool, once a tool of terror, had become a mirror, reflecting the truth of power, arrogance, and human cruelty. As Mathew was guided to the exit, Amber's mind catalogued everything for herself. She thought of the staff, now freed from fear, the illegal operations about to face scrutiny, and the environmental violations that would finally be addressed. Her foresight, preparation, and moral courage had created real change. She stepped away from the pool, dripping but composed. The air was heavy with tension, the aftermath of spectacle and reckoning hanging in every corner of the mansion. Guests and staff alike gave her a wide berth, recognizing instinctively that she had changed the hierarchy of this world without a single act of vengeance. Amber's thoughts drifted briefly to the piranhas, the school she had studied so closely, the behavior she had predicted and used to her advantage. The skills honed over years of study had intersected perfectly with instinct, courage, and ethical resolve. She had turned knowledge into power, but wielded it responsibly. She wiped the last of the water from her face and straightened. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, sunlight glinting off the marble floors and the now placid water. Everything looked beautiful, innocuous, safe, but she knew better. Beauty and danger had coexisted in this mansion for years, and she had just demonstrated that intelligence, preparation, and moral integrity could navigate both, and triumph. A young staff member approached quietly, eyes wide. "Ms. Reginald, thank you. We don't know how to." Amber shook her head gently. "You don't need to thank me. Just stay observant. Stay prepared. And never let fear dictate your actions." She glanced back at the pool one last time, noting the glint of sunlight on its clean surface, the faint ripples lingering from the whirlpool she had controlled, and the calm that now reigned where chaos had moments ago. Authorities continued their work around her, questions being asked, statements recorded. But Amber felt no need to linger. Her mission was complete. She had delivered justice without cruelty, exposed wrongdoing without compromising her ethics, and ensured that the man who had tried to intimidate and harm her faced the consequences of his actions. With a final look at the mansion and the guests who were beginning to murmur about the night's extraordinary events, Amber turned away. The mansion's grandeur, the wealth, the spectacle, it no longer mattered. Her role was done. The world outside would see the evidence, and the law, the truth, and human decency would take their course. She walked through the halls with steady steps, water dripping from her sleeves and hair, her mind clear, her heart steady. The tension of the night gave way to quiet satisfaction. She had acted with intelligence, with courage, and with moral clarity. And in that clarity, she found her victory. The mansion, once a place of fear and spectacle, was now just a building. The piranha pool, once a tool of domination, now reflected only the calm after the storm, the result of calculated restraint and justice served. Amber left it behind, confident that the balance had been restored. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. Amber walked away from the chaos, from the spectacle, from the man who had underestimated her. Each step was deliberate, her mind already cataloging the lessons of the night, the intelligence required, the courage tested, and the ethical lines drawn and honored. She had survived, she had triumphed, and she had chosen mercy over vengeance. That choice, more than the spectacle or the humiliation of her adversary, would define her. And as she stepped into the cool evening air, leaving the mansion and its chaos behind, Amber knew one thing with certainty: intelligence, preparation, and moral courage could defeat even the most untouchable of powers. The video went viral within hours. Amber's careful recordings, capturing every second of Mathew's panic, his confessions, and the orchestrated chaos of the pool, spread like wildfire across social media. News outlets picked up the story, amplifying it with headlines that highlighted the cruelty, the audacity, and the reversal of power. Billionaire humiliated in own piranha pool, janitor turns tables. The world watched, transfixed, as the untouchable was exposed not by wealth, influence, or force, but by intelligence, courage, and moral precision. Comments flooded the feeds: outrage, disbelief, admiration. Thousands praised Amber's composure, her restraint, and her ability to act decisively under unimaginable pressure. Others debated the spectacle itself, the ethics of using a man's own cruelty against him. But one message was unanimous. Justice had been served, and the lesson had been crystal clear: power without accountability is fragile. Authorities wasted no time. Within days, Mathew Livingston faced multiple investigations: embezzlement, exploitation of staff, environmental violations, and the reckless endangerment of employees and guests. The piranha pool, once a private instrument of terror, became the centerpiece of the case. Engineers and inspectors examined its structure, confirming Amber's meticulous observations. Financial auditors combed through ledgers and accounts, and whistleblowers among the staff came forward, emboldened by the knowledge that they would be protected. Mathew's empire began to unravel. Contracts were frozen, assets investigated, and companies once thought untouchable came under scrutiny. The wealth he had wielded like a weapon offered him no shield now. His name became synonymous with cruelty, arrogance, and hubris. Amber watched from the sidelines, knowing that her work had sparked a chain reaction that extended far beyond the mansion. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere shifted permanently. Staff no longer moved with fear, they moved with careful confidence, aware now that they were seen, that they were valued, that the truth had consequences. Amber's colleagues, once timid in the presence of a man who demanded loyalty through intimidation, now spoke freely, shared knowledge, and planned improvements to safety and workplace standards. The mansion no longer bore the aura of oppressive wealth, it had been transformed into a symbol of vigilance and resilience. Amber returned to her life outside the mansion with a quiet sense of satisfaction. She didn't seek recognition, she didn't crave applause. Her reward was the knowledge that injustice had been exposed, that the powerful had been held accountable, and that she had acted according to principles that mattered more than money, fame, or fear. Her work in marine biology, once abandoned due to family tragedy and financial hardship, had informed every calculated step of the confrontation. The knowledge of predatory fish behavior, survival instincts, and meticulous observation had saved her life, and had enabled her to turn the tables on someone who underestimated her at every turn. She reflected on those years of study, realizing how preparation and intelligence could intersect with courage to produce profound results. Social media continued to hum with activity. Clips of Mathew's panic circulated endlessly, snippets of flailing arms, the whirlpool in the pool, the piranhas, and finally, the moment of his full confession. Amber's name became a symbol of strategic brilliance and moral courage. Yet she remained grounded, aware that fame was fleeting but integrity was enduring. The staff she had indirectly liberated were now gaining protections: safer working conditions, transparent oversight, and union representation in some cases. Those who had feared reprisals now walked taller, spoke louder, and operated with the quiet confidence of people who had seen that even the most imposing power could be confronted successfully. Amber had set a precedent, not with violence, but with intelligence, courage, and ethical clarity. From her modest apartment, she observed the coverage and outcomes. The world had changed around her actions, and she allowed herself a rare smile. She hadn't sought to destroy Mathew. She had sought to level the playing field, to demonstrate that cruelty could not remain unchecked. In that, she had succeeded beyond measure. Amber spent her days quietly, blending into ordinary routines. She returned to her studies part-time, volunteering at marine biology centers and sharing her knowledge with students eager to learn. Her skills were respected now, her courage celebrated in hushed admiration rather than public spectacle. The thrill of notoriety had no appeal. Justice, integrity, and moral clarity did. Occasionally, she revisited the mansion, not to confront, not to gloat, but to ensure that her interventions had left a lasting mark. The staff moved freely, the piranha pool remained secure under proper supervision, and the mansion itself no longer radiated intimidation. Amber's presence was no longer necessary there, yet her influence lingered. She often reflected on the night of the pool, replaying the events in her mind not with fear, but with clarity. Every calculation, every adjustment of the currents, every moment of patience and observation had contributed to the outcome. She realized that survival alone was not enough. True triumph came from combining preparation, courage, and ethical action. News cycles continued to cover the fallout. Mathew faced fines, legal restrictions, and public condemnation. Corporate boards replaced him, and his name faded from prominence, replaced by coverage of the ethical reforms he had so violently resisted. Amber watched it all from a distance. Content. The work was done, and the lesson had been delivered. Power, cruelty, and arrogance could not withstand intelligence, preparation, and moral courage. Evenings found Amber on her balcony, looking at the city lights, reflecting on the delicate balance between knowledge and action, fear and courage, cruelty and justice. She thought of the piranhas, the currents, the whirlpool she had controlled with calm precision. She thought of Mathew, of the guests, of the staff, and of herself, poised at the center of it all, calm and victorious. Her life had returned to quiet routines, but the events of that night had reshaped her world. She had proven something profound, that intellect paired with courage could level the most insurmountable hierarchies, that preparation could transform terror into triumph, and that ethical restraint could wield more power than cruelty ever could. Amber walked away from the mansion for the final time, leaving behind the spectacle, the wealth, and the chaos. The sunlight glinted off the piranha pool, calm and deceptively serene. She paused for a moment, observing it from afar. In its stillness, she saw the symbol of the balance she had restored, knowledge, preparation, and moral courage prevailing over unchecked power. And in that quiet reflection, Amber knew one thing with certainty: intelligence, vigilance, and integrity were forces no arrogance could overcome. She turned, stepping away from the mansion and into the city beyond, carrying with her the quiet triumph of a life lived with courage, skill, and unwavering ethical clarity. The world had witnessed what she had accomplished, but more importantly, she had witnessed it herself. She had survived, she had acted, and she had restored justice without sacrificing the principles that mattered most. Amber walked into the night, confident, composed, and at peace. The mansion faded behind her, the chaos reduced to memory, and the piranha pool to a calm, glassy surface. The lesson was clear, and it endured. Even the cruelest power could be undone by intelligence, preparation, and moral courage. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Click the image on your screen to watch the next video. Hit subscribe if you believe no one deserves to be bullied or controlled by people like Mathew Livingston. Only those who enable cruelty, the kind who hide behind money and intimidation, would ignore what happened here. Don't be like them. Subscribe if you stand for fairness. And if you believe workers deserve safety and respect, comment, "Justice matters."